The state of Florida is left picking up the pieces today after Hurricane Milton brought powerful winds and dangerous flooding to many areas of the state. Milton made landfall along the Gulf Coast as a Category 3 storm, but weakened into a Category 1 as it progressed. Officials say there were numerous deaths and rescue efforts are currently underway in places like Tampa, St. Petersburg, and Sarasota.
It is imperative that everyone continues to follow the direction of local officials. Milton may have passed, but the danger it poses has not. Downed power lines, flood waters, non-potable drinking water, and debris are creating deadly conditions.
The fierce winds from Hurricane Milton were strong enough to bring down a large construction crane, which landed onto an office building in the St. Petersburg, Tampa area.
It sounds like we avoided the surge flooding, but the wind in and of itself was enough to cause, the crane to fall.
Emergency crews are busy cleaning up the destruction after Milton hit landfall as a Category 3 hurricane. The storm system produced winds of more than 120 miles per hour, which ripped through the infrastructure and even tore apart the roof of Tropicana Field, home of Major League Baseball's Tampa Bay Rays.
That's all you see is lines of people's property and furniture and stuff. So that was obviously a big concern. As I know right now, they are not allowing anyone, unless you stuck it through. They were rescuing people off secondary floors and whatnot.
Torrential rainfall also left many areas across the state flooded and prompted rescue units to begin searching. So far, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says the state's National Guard has already saved hundreds stranded in the aftermath, and millions of others left picking up the pieces are without power.
We've got 3.2 million that are without power, 3.2 million accounts throughout the state of Florida. Since the storm hit, 880,000 have been restored. So we've basically had a storm that's had over 4 million power outages. I think that's probably similar to what we saw with Hurricanes Irma and Hurricanes Ian.
Despite many people staying behind, the state issued a mass evacuation order to prepare for the worst possible outcome.
There was a lot of prep because first there was the decision, do we stay or do we go? A lot of times these hurricanes will last minute take, another little, they call it a wobble. And last night that happened again right at the last hour. They expected the hurricane to hit at 2 a.m. It hit at, 6 p.m., 7 p.m. So, these things happen all the time with a wobble.
State officials are also urging residents to stay off the roads while a coordinated recovery effort gets underway.
When it gets dark, it's not going to make it any less perilous out there. There are flooded roadways. There's roadways that have washed away. We have about 170,000 people who don't have power. You can see the devastation that we took. We really need our residents to allow the county and the cities to get out there with their public works, their road and bridge, to let Duke Energy get out there to get us back on our feet by Friday morning.
State officials are now confirming at least 13 people are dead from the devastating storm and are expecting that death toll to climb during recovery. As for the cost of the storm, an American credit agency believes insured losses could be in the range of $30 to $50 billion. Ron DeSantis says the state is still assessing the damage. Manisa.
Thanks, Jason. CNN reporter Lee Waldman was on the ground in Tampa, Florida, overnight as the hurricane hit. She describes what she saw.
But yes, the flash flood warnings, they were very serious. We saw almost 10 inches of rain fall here in Tampa on average for the entire month of October. It's just over 2 inches. The street behind me turned into a river with water flowing steadily downstream and taking debris with it. We were feeling strong wind gusts of up to 100 miles per hour blowing us down the sidewalk. It was really powerful in the hours leading up to Milton's landfall and also in the hours after Milton made landfall. The mayor of Tampa said that it was going to be a rough few hours, and she wasn't lying. We had power for a long time here, but just before we lost power, there's power lines above us. I know it's dark now, you can't see it, but those power lines started to spark and set flares across the street. We had to run for cover to try and get out of the way of danger. The power pole itself started to shake. It became a really dicey situation where we were here in Tampa. We were far away from where this storm actually made landfall. You can kind of hear one of those wind gusts coming in right now. This is still the remnants of the outer bands of Milton as it treks through Florida.
For more on Hurricane Milton, we're joined now by David Phillips, senior climatologist with Environment Canada. Thanks for joining us, David.
Well, thank you, Manisa. Nice to join you, too.
Officials have said that while Hurricane Milton was a powerful storm, it ended up being slightly less destructive than we initially expected. What changed before landfall?
Well, it's just the personality and the character of the storm. My gosh, I think what was remarkable was 4 days ago, they sort of guessed that where this storm was going to make landfall, and guess what? They were just out by 20 kilometers. So it was really remarkable. To me, that would be like throwing a dart and trying to a mile away and trying to hit a stop sign right on that stop sign. So it was just a remarkable example of what science has done to us to enable us to give much more information out to people much earlier, and to emergency people can respond better to it, and the public is better protected from this. Now, the storm, as the storm approaches the land, there are a lot of things happening to it. It wiggles and it wobbles, and so it can move from one area to another. It did get downgraded from a Category 5, which had been some of the strongest hurricane ever in the Atlantic, to arrived as a Category 3. But, Manisa, that's a difference of about maybe 45 kilometer per hour winds to go from a 5 to a 3. So it was still pretty powerful. The wall of water was also gigantic, a lot of storm surge and a lot of rain. But I think the challenge from a meteorological point of view is there was a lot of threats of tornadoes. I mean, there were over 100 tornado warnings in the state of Florida yesterday, and at least 20 touchdowns. And so that is record rainfall. Almost a half a year's worth of rain fell in St. Petersburg and parts of Tampa. And then the storm surge. I mean, my gosh, it was forecasted to be 15 meters high. I think it was maybe 10, so it came down a bit. But also the storm, I think the reason why the storm surge was not quite as high is the storm kind of weakened as it got close to the shore, and it spread out. So there were more people affected by it than just a little zone where the storm would have come across the coastline. It was spread out more, and so more people affected, but those not nearly as disastrous as it would have been if it had been a tightly wound storm hitting a smaller area.
You mentioned tornadoes. Is it normal to see that many tornadoes in the midst of a hurricane? And how did they form?
Well, Melissa, it's right. It is common. I mean, you have that. I mean, talk about the misery. I mean, you've got the hurricane to worry about, and then you've got these twisters that are breaking out all over the place. And really, when you think about the dynamics of a storm, where you're getting these incredibly strong winds blowing at different directions, maybe, and then it causes the air to twist. So that column of air is twisting, and so naturally, you're going to get kind of updrafts and twists and turns and wiggles and wobbles, and so therefore it is quite common. They tend to be not very strong. They're not sort of category an EF5 or 4. They tend down to be EF0s and 1s and 2s, but they still can scare you and can cause some local damage. But I think it really shocked a lot of forecasters that how the entire state was under the grips of this monster hurricane, and you get areas like Miami had tornado touchdowns, and they weren't really in the crosshairs of this particular storm. So, the whole state was just preoccupied with extreme weather yesterday and overnight.
Florida is still reeling from Hurricane Helene. How common is it to see two significant hurricanes in the same area back to back like this?
Well, clearly a good point. I mean, Melissa, this is clearly, it's not, wasn't just one. I mean, they've had 3 hurricanes across Florida this season. They've had 5 make landfall in the United States. So it's been a very active up to now, and the season's not over. I mean, it doesn't end till typically the end of November, and the water out there is very, very hot. But Helena was like 2 weeks ago, and the Helene, I'm sorry, 2 weeks ago, but a lot of the debris hadn't been picked up. So a lot of concern was the winds and the waves, the water picking up all this debris from a previous hurricane and just projecting it into the air and causing more damage. And sometimes the pieces of debris become like javelins thrown in the air and can spear people or cause more property damage. That was a concern to a lot of municipal officials, that the cleanup would take 6 months. They had just 2 weeks to do that. So this was a concern, and a lot of the debris from now 2 storms is sitting around and needs to be cleared up, because hey, the season is not over yet. The water temperatures out in the Atlantic are like hot tubs, and we could clearly see more of these storms before the season finally comes to an end.
Thanks so much for chatting today, Dave.
Well, you're welcome, Vanessa. Thank you so much for having me.